Christoph, thank you very much for taking time out. And I want to straight away ask you this, that as the topic of our discussion says, we are living in a world where flux has become the new normal, right? It's difficult for corporations to make business plans if CEOs keep changing their strategy. But now it's happening in politics, in trade, in diplomacy. When you meet business leaders, what do you tell them? How are they reacting or dealing with this uncertain times?
Well, Arijit, it's great to see you, and it's great to be here. For sure, if you talk to CEOs anywhere in the world, any industry, they are all talking about how much uncertainty, disruption, change they had to deal with over the past years. Mm-hmm. And let's not forget, it's still just a few years ago that the pandemic changed everything in business. You then had military conflicts and escalations. You had geopolitical situations. You have all the uncertainty and disruption coming from technology, in particular AI. Mm-hmm. And look, it is a very intense time to be a CEO. Now, what do? I do think most CEOs at this point have accepted that it will continue like that. No one has the assumption that the next 3, 4, 5 years are going to be calm and easy and it's all going to be just smooth sailing. So what do people do, and what's the advice that I give them? I think, first of all, it sounds very basic, but it's important, control what you can control. And that is set your company up to be efficient, have a good cost position, be financially flexible, so that gives you room to breathe for whatever uncertainty hits you. Number two, I think you have to prepare. You need to sense what new changes could be coming. You need to do scenario planning. By the way, for us as BCG, that's an all-time high of scenario planning and simulation work that we are doing on all sorts of topics. And number three, it is run the company with a different level of flexibility and nimbleness. If you have very rigid, static supply chains, you are likely going to be in trouble. If you have very static capital deployment, you are likely going to be in trouble. So I think it's these three things. Control what you can control, sense and anticipate, and third, set the company up to be much more flexible than it traditionally has been along all core functions. I think that's a good recipe to succeed.
But I wanted to ask you, how easy or difficult is it to match that with the aspirations of public company investors? Because then you're literally living quarter on quarter. So these long-term scenario planning, how do you appease shareholders who just want returns?
Well, I don't think that's new, Arijit, that companies and CEOs need to balance the short term and the long term. If you look at the most successful companies on the planet at this point, take a Microsoft as an example, I don't think that Satya sees a trade-off between short-term and long-term. He is very long-term oriented, has a great strategic vision and foresight, but he still delivers quarter after quarter. So I do think investors get it that there's uncertainty, but investors, of course, want to get that balance right. We want a long-term direction, but you can't screw up in the short term. So I think there is reasonable acceptance that that's the reality, and that's what you need to deliver.
Right. And in the mix now you have AI, I guess, which is the common catchphrase in all boardrooms. But in the past, we have lived through several technology cycles, right? How much of AI, according to you, is hype, number one? And number two, has AI yet moved the needle when it comes to corporate P&Ls?
Well, that's the question that everyone asks right now when you come to big conferences and CEOs get together. I do think that the change that will come from AI is more profound, more substantive, and more fundamental than other technological shifts have been in recent years. Mm-hmm. Where do we stand in that cycle? I do think it's really interesting now as we enter Q3, Q4 of 2025. The first reality is AI really hit the mainstream radar with the launch of ChatGPT in late 2022. 23 was a bit of an experimentation year. 24 was a piloting year. 25 is the scaling year, as I would call it, Arijit. And now many companies are realizing, oh wow, the technology is really interesting and really impactful, but it's really hard to scale it. And what I mean by scaling is, how do you go from 100 or 500 or 1,000 people playing with it in a certain function in your company to 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 using it? And how do you get to the real financial return? And I think that is what many companies are struggling with. Our own surveys as BCG say that about 70% of the companies feel that they have not yet met their financial targets. So it's a very interesting window. We are now getting into the budgeting and planning cycle for 2026 in many parts of the world. And every CEO and CFO have the discussion with their team, okay, guys, we are investing all this money. Now we need to see top line return or cost return, but one way or another, it needs to happen. And there are great examples. There are very successful stories out there in various industries, but still, the majority of companies are still struggling at this point in time.
Would you say board-run companies are faster when it comes to AI adoption and investing or doubling down versus family-owned companies? Because in India, we have lots of conglomerates or business houses which are still family-owned. Are they also keen or to double down right away?
Well, first of all, most generally, I would say that India has a lot of ingredients in place to be a real powerhouse when it comes to AI.
Sure.
And why do I say that? First of all, there is workforce that is just very tech-affine, highly educated, highly nimble, and that's a huge asset when AI comes. Secondly, I experience the Indian CEOs and especially also the family owners and promoters to be very savvy and selective in where they go for AI and where they wait. And so the bar is high. And if you can show a great path to return on investment, the Indian companies are eager and bold and fast, but where they are uncertain, they are slow, and maybe rightly so. And then the third thing, which is really interesting, in the end, any AI effort at a big company is not really a tech question. It is a change management question. Do you get your workforce to work differently going forward? And what I observe in India is, wow, once you have picked your functions, once you have picked your focus areas, the Indian companies move really fast. It is a pretty adaptive environment, obviously also helped by the fact that it's growth-centric and there's a lot of positive momentum. So my take is India is very well equipped, very well positioned. It's more selective, or many companies are more selective, but if they move with great success.
And then how is BCG adapting to the ever-changing India story? Where do you think India Inc. can gain or have strategic advantage in this environment of, geopolitical, technological shifts?
Yeah, well, India is a fantastic market for BCG. We love the business here for various reasons. Arijit, the first one is the customer and client base as such. It's just great companies with great ambitions. That's always great to serve. Secondly, it's a formidable talent market for us. It's amazing to see who we can recruit and then also how the colleagues from India contribute on a global scale in BCG. And the third thing, which is really remarkable, is India is a very powerful innovation hub for BCG. If I look at tech, AI, sustainability, in these areas where a lot of change is happening, India is now at the forefront of work that we do. And we have fantastic examples here, and for those three reasons, we love working here. How has our business evolved? Well, look, we are now for years working with the leading companies in India on their transformation. It's not just a case here, a case there, you deliver a packet of PowerPoint slides. It's really changing the fundamentals of the business. It has a big component of adopting technology in areas where it really works. And by the way, it also has a meaningful amount of kind of work when it comes to renewable energy, sustainability. It's quite amazing to see the continued entrepreneurial commitment here in India. We are part of India's journey, and we are very proud of that.
You said you touched upon a lot of interesting points. Let me, take one at a time. The environment aspect. We've made great strides in sustainability in our efforts for green power. But around the world, a lot of people would say ESG as a concept is dead. Would you agree?
Well, I would say if you ask 100 CEOs around the world, the majority of them would say that the ESG umbrella as such has lost relevance. And whether it's dead or not, I think is a big word. I think what is more important is the umbrella has become very artificial, and I mean, it's not kind of the spirit of the moment and the fashion of the moment anymore.
Right.
And I do think also for good reasons. What has not changed, however, Arijit, is that the underlying commitment to becoming a more sustainable business is still there in most parts of the world. The underlying commitment to evolving your workforce in a more inclusive way is still there, as long as it makes you better. And great governance is fundamentally important as well. But so I think the umbrella label has probably lost relevance for many leaders in global roles.
Right.
The underlying substance, as long as it's business-centric and not dogmatic, I think is still very much alive. And I do see that it's very much alive in many countries in Asia and also in India.
Right. So if you have to pick and choose, you know, pockets where India should double down, should it be on sustainability and green energy? Should it be on AI? Should it be on manufacturing? You know, where do you see the sweet spot or spots?
Well, it's that multiple choice question where you try to click all of them. I do think, first of all, let's keep some of the proportions in mind.
Right.
India is a very sizable economy. It's on a path to become a $7 trillion GDP economy by 2030. India has close to 400 million of population that is Gen Z. That's bigger than the United States. That's bigger than the EU. There is a lot of growth, and I do think it's a formidable business environment to begin with. Serve that really well and develop it as a country. Secondly, I do think technology remains center to the future of India. I do think on top of the traditional IT outsourcing business, there's now a wave of global capability centers coming, which are also very AI-centric. We work for many multinational clients who set up their leading-edge AI centers in India at this point. Banks, insurance companies, automotive companies. I think there's a huge opportunity for India in that regard. I would say overall, adopting AI productively across your industrial base is very promising. I do think energy is a key determinant of success of any economy. You know that very well. It's one of your areas of focus as a journalist. I think getting the energy mix right, continuing to invest productively and with high return and thoroughly in renewables and the underlying technologies is a wise strategy. And then manufacturing, I mean, India has been gaining relevance on the global map for manufacturing. It will continue to gain relevance. So I do think it's all of these areas that you mentioned, and I'm deeply convinced that there's a fantastic future for India going forward.
Let me do, you know, a mood check of sorts. I mean, since you're in India, I'm sure you're meeting CEOs. Are they worried, stressed, you know, because what's happening on the tariff front, on what's happening, the signals from Washington, you know, or it's business as usual?
The Indian CEOs I saw just over the past few days are remarkably calm.
Really?
Yeah. Of course, there's a lot of change, and now everyone points to tariffs, but let's just look at the reality of global trade. Every year, BCG publishes a global trade report for which we pull millions of data points about countries around the world, product categories, cost positions, trade policies, etc. And this January, we came out with our 2025 edition, and we had assumed that there would be an increase in tariffs throughout the year. Not precisely right on every dimension, but the general direction was right. And it comes to one very clear conclusion. Trade will continue to grow. It will continue to grow at a somewhat lower rate than in the past, but it will continue to grow. And it will grow disproportionately with all countries in the global south. And amongst those, India is one of the preeminent players. There will be significant increase in trade that India does with the rest of the world. You see that with Southeast Asia. You see that with the Middle East. You see that with Japan, with Korea. Now you have an agreement with the UK. India is going to see continued trade growth. And then over time, there's alignment here, alignment there, and less alignment than somewhere else. The fundamental direction is unchanged. And I do think the CEOs get that. Now, Arijit, I also know that there are some industries, for example, in textiles, where there's a lot of stress right now, and understandably so. But fundamentally, for the macroeconomy of India, you are well positioned to trade with many parts of the world, and I do only believe that it's going to continue to increase.
Right. Now, both trade and tech is getting weaponized. We are seeing this race for AI between China and US. Where do countries like India stand in all this? How do we, where can we stand out? What can be our X factor?
There have been thousands of reports writing about the geopolitics and the connection to trade and AI and technology more broadly. I'm not going to be the 1001st voice on this stage to comment on that, but here's an interesting observation, and that is what's actually happening with what you could call the AI middle powers. Mm-hmm. And what do I mean by those? Take a look at Korea and Japan. They are investing very boldly in AI. They use their hardware and broader tech ecosystems to scale, and they do remarkable things and make remarkable progress. Then look at the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, UAE, with the impeccable funding that they have from their sovereign wealth funds, which are very astute investors. They are building amazing tech infrastructure. They're investing boldly in the upskilling of their workforce. And India falls into that category. I do think India is, as I said earlier, very well positioned to be a real force in AI. Because of talent, because of entrepreneurial spirit, because of agility of organizations, and because of a formidable AI ecosystem when it comes to startups and the investment that flows into those. I think it's a priority for India, and I do expect that there will be very high returns and kind of big movement in the country.
Why I'm asking this is also because Silicon Valley or the big tech hubs in Europe, we see a lot of Indian CEOs or Indian origin CEOs running these big tech companies. But we still don't have our own Indian NVIDIA. We don't have our Indian Microsoft. Where did we miss the bus?
Well, if you look at it that way, the whole world, other than a few companies on the West Coast and a few in China, have missed the bus. Mm-hmm. And that's just the reality of where big-scale innovation has happened, right? But in the end, I think you need to discern between two things. The first one is, where do the tech companies as such sit, but then also where does the technology get adopted? Mm-hmm. And the upside for all these other economies, for the Europeans, for the Japanese, the Koreans, the Indians, is much bigger if they adopt AI productively across their entire industrial base, across their entire services base. If the Indian banks, the Indian insurance companies, retailers, etc., adopt AI productively, the economic impact and the economic potential is huge. Yeah. And you can easily live with the fact that some of the technology companies reside elsewhere.
Right. You said, or your message to CEOs has been, control what you can control. We are running out of time, so the last thing I wanted to ask you, other than controlling what they can control, what are the other tenets of good leadership looking like in 2025?
Well, given that we are at time, I'm going to keep this very short. It is an interesting moment because the impression that we all get is it's all going to be about technology, technology, technology. We are all going to be AI'd away. You as a journalist, me as a consultant, many of you in the audience in your respective business. The simple truth is human beings will still make a huge difference. It is about empathy, it's about care, it's about relatability, it's about judgment, and I do believe that actually emphasizing the human factor as a CEO, how you deal with your own team, but also how human you still come across vis-a-vis your customers, vis-a-vis your suppliers, regulators, governments, etc., is going to remain hugely differentiating no matter how much AI is going to be out there.
I think that's a very, very important point that you talked about. Thank you so much, Christoph. We're running out of time. We have a long way to go. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Arijit.
Thank you, Mr. Schweizer, for that compelling perspective. Thank you, Arijit, for guiding that discussion with that precision.
From disruption to direction, this conversation offered a rare look at how strategy is being rewritten at the very top. Our next conversation takes us to the heart of India, not just geographically, but in terms of drive, vision, and momentum.
Now, long celebrated for its temples, forests, and heritage, Madhya Pradesh is now making national headlines for something else. A remarkable transformation. With bold reforms, strategic investments, and a renewed focus on inclusive development, the state is fast emerging as one of India's most compelling growth stories.
Helping us unpack this journey in a conversation titled From Heartland to Global Hub, Madhya Pradesh's role in India's rise, will be Associate Editor at the Economic Times, Deepshikha Sekawar.
And leading this charge is a man whose roots in the state run deep and whose leadership is now propelling the stage onto the global stage. Please join us in welcoming the Honorable Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Dr. Mohan Yadav. Dr. Yadav, Deepshikha.